Christian mysticism is anchored by a profound, historically documented reality known as theosis, a direct, transformative union between the human soul and God. It is an encounter with the divine that defines itself by its refusal to be captured by ordinary rational explanation. Post-Enlightenment thinking often presents an ultimatum. Either mysticism is unscientific nonsense, or it is a purely psychological brain state. In both scenarios, the possibility of a divine reality is removed. Complexity theory offers a different perspective. It provides a shared conceptual framework for systems characterized by nonlinearity and emergence, offering a descriptive vocabulary for spiritual transformation that respects its underlying mystery. Rather than choosing between rigorous science and authentic theology, we can observe how the Christian mystical journey aligns with the observed laws of emergent complexity. A complex adaptive system, or CAS, is an environment where individual parts interact in ways that aren't strictly linear. These interactions do not follow simple cause and effect rules. Instead, they generate structured, emergent behaviors that are impossible to predict from the individual parts alone. Historically, Christian mysticism has identified specific stages of spiritual growth: the purgative stage of virtue, the illuminative stage of deeper knowledge, and the unitive stage of shared life with God. We can translate this progression into a dynamic model, tracing the journey of a single human soul as it moves through the phase transitions of a complex adaptive system. This suggests that the writings of the mystics are not merely poetic. They are records of nonlinear system dynamics articulated through the language of the soul. This chart maps the spiritual trajectory: systemic complexity on the y-axis, time on the x-axis. At the origin sits the soul. Complex systems exhibit sensitive dependence on initial conditions. A minute variation dictates the entire trajectory, the butterfly effect. In this model, the incarnation functions as that initial condition, initiating the complex trajectory of human deification. In mathematics, an attractor is a set of values toward which a system tends to evolve. As seen here in the Lorentz attractor, even chaotic trajectories are bound by an underlying geometric order that defines their long-term behavior. Jesus Christ functions as the ultimate strange attractor, the goal toward which chaotic human trajectories are drawn. To guide the system toward that attractor, there must be a basin of attraction, an invisible field of influence. In theology, this is the work of the Holy Spirit, providing the inward lure that steers the soul's complex inner landscape. This provides a specific way to conceptualize the relationship between divine providence and human agency. God defines the long-term teleological attractor, while the individual soul remains responsible for the specific, nonlinear trajectory it takes toward that end. Looking back at the individual soul, we see it navigating by seeking a low-level, stable orbit, the purgative stage of establishing moral virtue. Spiritual practices act as inputs, initiating dynamic feedback loops. These elicit divine grace, shifting the node's baseline and moving the orbit higher on the y-axis. Growth in this stage is not a linear list of achievements, but the establishment of a reciprocal, reinforcing relationship with the divine. Evolution in complex systems often requires reaching the edge of chaos, a volatile state where a system breaks its rigid order to become highly adaptable. This boundary state mirrors the dark night of the soul, a period of intense spiritual desolation and disorientation, where the previous comforts of faith seem to vanish. In complex systems, a stable orbit can become a trap, preventing higher-order properties. To reach greater complexity, the system's existing structure must be disrupted. This phase is marked by perturbation. If the system cannot adapt, it risks a collapse into randomness. From this perspective, spiritual dryness is not a failure of faith, but a turbulent requirement for reaching a more complex state of union. If the system survives the disruption, it undergoes a phase transition, spontaneously self-organizing into a fundamentally new structure. This is the unitive stage, or theosis. The soul exhibits emergent properties, like profound peace, not present in its previous, less complex state. This framework provides a context for the problem of suffering and systemic brokenness. Because creation operates as an open, self-organizing system designed for genuine freedom, emergent pathologies and system collapses are possible outcomes. The same systemic flexibility that allows for deification also permits the possibility of suffering. Co-creation with God involves existing in a volatile cosmos, where the vulnerability of the system is the very thing that makes growth and transformation possible. We can apply these same principles to the collective. The church can be understood as a macroscopic, complex adaptive system. While often viewed as a top-down hierarchy, the church functions as a fluid network driven by decentralized interactions, where the Holy Spirit acts as an immanent guiding force. Wikipedia serves as a proof of concept for this architecture. It manages a massive global database through emergent collective behavior and distributed intelligence, rather than relying on a centralized authority to dictate every entry. The Missio Dei, the mission of God, operates similarly, relying on local adaptation and distributed agency to respond to a complex world. If the church is a complex adaptive system, then its resilience depends on its capacity for local adaptation. Rigid institutional control can hinder the very decentralized agility required to navigate a rapidly changing environment. This model helps bridge the gap between apophatic theology, which stresses God's unknowability, and cataphatic theology, which describes God's attributes. The concept of emergence allows these two traditions to coexist. God's essence remains transcendent and hidden, yet the immanent divine logic is reflected in the observable, order-generating rules of the universe. By moving beyond reductionist models, we can see the universe not as a static machine, but as a dynamic and interconnected process. This provides a scientific basis for perceiving God's continuous creative act as woven into the fabric of complex reality, moving beyond the model of a distant creator to one of intimate engagement. In this view, prayer functions as a systemic feedback loop and crisis as a catalyst for growth as the cosmos moves toward the attractor of Christ.